Welcome to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women that replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women in the United States, according to the CDC and NIH. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, or stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, and hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. Freeman, and you'll hear me interview other sisters in loss from around the world who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Storytelling is powerful. Storytelling is activism. Storytelling is healing. Now let's get started. Hello, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I would love for you to begin by sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, well, my name is Tatiana, but I go by Tots for short. Everybody calls me Tots. I was willing to accept twins if twins ever came to me. So having 2 babies within a few months of each other, I think they would have ended up being like 7 months apart or something. I was like, I'm just going to keep that blessing and just receive those blessings. So I'm going to proceed with both. And she's like, okay. So we're looking at our work policy to see like how many maternity leaves can you get within a year or whatever. So I was going to proceed with both. Ultimately, so she was due in October and she ended up giving birth, decided not to place again. And that time I was upset, but I had a baby in my womb. And so I wasn't as upset as I was the first 2 times. I still lost money on it, but I was kind of like, okay, but I still got a baby on the way. So it doesn't hurt as bad as it hurt the first 2 times. And when she was due, I was entering into my second trimester. So now I was like, I'm good now. Like I can tell people like, everything is okay. And I actually had like a coworker, not at the place I work, but at a partner organization who knew, because the second baby actually was like being born in a state that one of my people that I worked with was in as well. And, that person called and was like, is baby here? And I'm like, she decided not to place, but I'm actually pregnant. So like, there's still a baby coming, but it's going to be a little bit longer now because we got to wait for this one to cook. But like, there's still a baby on the way. So, I'm going through that or whatever. Pregnancy was hard. I was very tired in my first trimester. Like, I remember one time, and mind you, like I teach and I do like remote work or whatever. I remember one time, like there was like one student who knew that I was pregnant and was like checking on me. And I was like, I'm so tired. I want to cry. Like I had never felt that level of exhaustion, like wanting to eat. Like I had a lot of like morning sickness, all day sickness, and just like headaches and round ligament pain is like the official name, but I feel like people called it lightning crotch or something. They was using somewhere. I was having all of that. Like it wasn't it wasn't an easy pregnancy. And I actually had like mind you, I told you I used to be living my best life, like before I was decided to be a pregnant. So I had gone out to see like Beyonce Renaissance in Las Vegas. It was tickets that I had already purchased or whatever. And this was in August, like a couple weeks after I found out I was pregnant. And that was like the day that I started having symptoms. And like I'm on my way to the airport early in the morning and I'm trying to eat like some fruit and it's making me sick. Like the smell of it is making me sick. The mangoes. At first I thought I was imagining things. I was like, I can't eat this. Then I'm on the flight. I'm sick and it's like a super long flight because it's all the way to Las Vegas. And so like I was sick. I get there. I don't really want to get out of my bed, but I'm like, I came out of the way. I heard to see. And so like I had canceled a trip. I was supposed to go see Janelle Monáe the following month. I canceled it. I was like, forget the cost of that ticket. I'm canceling this. I'm not going. I ended up going to see like Usher in Vegas, my friend. I didn't cancel that one. If it had been a solo trip like the other ones, I would have canceled. But I didn't cancel. And we were like at the Louvre. I didn't even want to look at the Mona Lisa because I was tired. I was like, I'm sitting down. You go look at the Mona Lisa. I'm gonna sit over here. Like, I didn't really want to do it. The Louvre has so many stairs, and I was just so tired. And it was just, I was not. Pregnancy was not easy, and so you know, it wasn't. I was happy that the baby was coming, but I was not happy with everything that was going on with my body and like all of that. Um, it was a lot, and I just really didn't. And I don't have a lot of friends who like have had children or whatever. My other friend, actually, who I went to Paris with, she was trying to get pregnant. We actually found out we got off our birth control the same week, except she has like a live-in boyfriend. And it was just like a coincidence. We were in Miami. We just told each other we got off our birth control or whatever. And she was like, how big even is the baby? Like, why are you so tired? I'm like, it's not because of the size of the baby. It's because of my hormones. Like, she had never been pregnant, so she didn't really understand. And so it was a lot. Um, the day after Thanksgiving, I ended up like waking up, and that day I was having a lot of discharge. And I was like, why am I having like all of this discharge? It was like soaking through my pants. And I was like, so I ended up having to like change my pants, put on a pad. And I was like, this is kind of odd. Like, and it had been going on like all day. And then I started to have like a discomfort in my belly. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And mind you, I had been planning for a home birth. And so I reached out to my midwife and I was like, I'm having a watery discharge. I'm having discomfort in my belly. I'm actually like on all fours right now trying to get comfortable. I was like, is this normal? Because I've never been pregnant before. And I had been having a difficult pregnancy. And she's like, yeah, it's normal. Like you have audition. And I had been Googling prior to that. And sometimes like, well, sometimes discharge is normal, sometimes it's not. And sometimes cramps is normal, sometimes it's not. So I'm like, well, how am I supposed to know which time is the normal time, which time is the not normal time? So I ended up calling I text my midwife. It was like 8 p.m. or something like that, maybe 8:30. And she's like, yeah, it's normal. So I'm like, okay. Um, it got to be like 10. I got in the bed to go to sleep and my water broke. It just, I heard a pop and then I just started gushing. I leaped out of bed and it's just gushing, gushing, gushing out onto the floor, um, onto the carpet. And I was like, oh my God. So I started crying. I called the midwife. I'm like, I think my water just broke. She's like, how far along are you? I'm like 19 weeks and 3 days. She was like, go to the emergency room, like right now. So I was like, okay. So, and I was a foster parent as well. So I had to go and tell my foster kid, I'm like, I'm about to go to the hospital. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, my water broke. She's like, I'm coming with you. She was like 17. She's like, I'm coming with you. So she comes with me to the hospital. We go to the emergency room and they were like, go, sit down and we'll call you whatever. And she said, no, you need to see her right now. She's only 4 or 5 months pregnant. She's like, I can't really remember which one, but her water just broke. You need to see her now. Like, and they were like, oh my God, your water broke? And she said, you're how far along? I was like 19 weeks and 3 days. They're like, you're sure your water broke? I'm like, I'm pretty freaking sure. Like there's this fluid is all over me. I'm in my pajamas and and they're like, okay, all right. So now they're reacting. They take us back. I just want to say I had a very traumatic experience in the hospital. People were taking too long to deal with me. They were trying to tell me stuff wasn't the truth that was the truth. Oh, your water probably didn't break. It's probably just pee. I said, it's not pee. It doesn't even come out the same hole. Like, pee comes out of your urethra. This is coming out of my vaginal canal. Like, this is not, and like I'm like, it's not pee. Like, and they're like, well, sometimes you pee on yourself when you're pregnant. That's not what's going on here. And it's continually coming. It went out onto my floor. While I was driving, it's on my car seat, it's on the little wheelchair you just wheeled me in. Like, this is not urine. And they're like, well, we'll do a test. So they run a test. And then they're like, the test said that it's actually not amniotic fluid. And I was like, I don't know about this. So I'm talking to my foster daughter while they're in the other room, and she's like, you should get a second opinion because, like, I don't know about this. Because I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is not urine. They're trying to tell me it's urine. So I end up doing an ultrasound, and then they were like, okay, so actually your ultrasound revealed something different. Your water, your womb is empty. Like, I mean, the baby's in there, and the baby's heart's beating, and baby's good. but it's empty. Like there's no amniotic fluid in there. So yeah, your water broke. So we're gonna actually admit you. And I'm kind of speeding up for the sake of the story because they were taking like ridiculous amounts of time to even deal with me. And so I ended up, getting checked in. So she ended up actually sent her home in an Uber. And
So this was in the emergency room. Did they ever move you to labor and delivery at this point?
at this point, all of this was an emergency area, but
Okay.
they ended up after determining that actually, they were like, they're going to admit me. So they moved me upstairs into the maternity ward, but it
Okay.
wasn't the labor and delivery portion of that yet. They were telling me, they're like, we're going to try to keep you pregnant. They're like, you're not far enough along. Like if this baby comes, the baby won't live. So we're gonna try to keep you pregnant. Like we're gonna so they were like testing me to see if I had like gonorrhea or chlamydia or something like that, some sort of infection that would have caused my water to break. They're not finding anything. And so they're like, we're gonna give you broad spectrum antibiotics, we're gonna try to keep you pregnant or whatever. And so I'm like, does that happen? And they're like, it's happened. So like I'm thinking that there's hope at this point.
Mm.
I'm thinking because they're telling me it has happened before that people's water broke and then their sac replenished and like whatever. So I'm like, oh, okay. So maybe the baby won't come.
You weren't in labor at that point though?
Well, not active labor, but I now realize that I think I had been in early labor because like
Right.
that
That's what I was about
pain
to
that
say.
I
You
was
probably weren't in
feeling.
labor. You just didn't know.
Yeah, like that pain that I was feeling earlier, or really it was like more of a discomfort than a pain, which is also why I wasn't quite sure if I should be alarmed. I think was a sign, and that leaking, I think was amniotic fluid leaking the whole time, and I just didn't know that I was in early labor. And
Hmm.
even in that moment, they didn't categorize me as being in labor. I wasn't in active labor,
Right. And I
but
think that is the disconnect in the hospital system because, yeah, your amniotic fluid can leak and you can sustain a pregnancy to vitality, which is 24 weeks. But when
mhm,
your body is telling you to be in that's actually in labor, even if it's not an active labor, you still are going to labor and turn to active labor at some point. It's
yeah.
not going to take 4 weeks.
And
It may be immediate, right?
they were not like, yeah. So I've later connected dots and been like, I was in active labor all that whole day. I didn't notice because I had never been pregnant before. And then I get to the hospital and they're telling me, first of all, that they didn't even think my water broke at first. And then they had to come to the same conclusion I had already come to. But then they're telling me that there's still hope. That like, and there actually wasn't any hope. And so, and even some people, like one person asked me if I wanted to talk to the chaplain. I'm like, no, I'm good. They're like, do you want to call any of your family to come in? I'm like, my family is in Chicago. Like, my family is nowhere near here. And if the baby's not coming, I don't really even understand why I should call my family. So like, I was not,
So
nobody came.
they didn't even connect it that you could lose this baby. They were just giving you false hope, but bringing in a chaplain and a social worker.
Well, no social worker,
Well,
just like,
a chaplain at this point, which is
yeah, they were like, do you? And I'm like, no. So, and honestly, I should have even thought to myself, why are they offering this? But I thought it was just like, because I'm dealing with something, but I just really did not think the baby was coming. I'm like, I just was not, they should have been more real with me and direct. And I'm a very direct person. They should have been much more direct with me and I would have responded in a very different way. And like, um, so like, because they were like, do you want to call the baby's father? I'm like, baby, don't have a father. I have a sperm donor. Like, I actually had started dating somebody at this point, the person who I was telling earlier in the story who was checking on me. And I was like, oh, our adopted baby isn't coming. But so I actually was dating somebody at this time, but it wasn't the baby's father. And then I was like, well, maybe I should call him because he would probably be upset if I didn't tell him I was in the hospital. I called him. He didn't. I FaceTimed him. He lived in a rural community. And then later I learned he didn't get the call. He didn't know that I had called. So nobody was there, but I was like, my best friend was watching my foster child. So she couldn't have been there if she wanted to, because I ended up having to have her take her. And my family doesn't live in the state that I live in. And my other best friend is supporting me on the phone and we're talking about it. But this is a married man. So like he's not gonna be coming up to the hospital and being with me through all of this. So we're kind of communicating. I had been talking to my mom. I had been telling her about everything, but I didn't tell her like fly out here because I didn't think we needed to do all of that. So ultimately at one point there, like I'm starting to get like cramps that I'm now later I can say are contractions, but I'm like, it's starting to get, and I'm like, this is like, I'm on the phone with my mom, I'm like, this is like really uncomfortable. I'm like, so now I'm trying to get in, but like whatever. And at one point somebody comes in and touches my stomach and I was like, because like it hurt. And I was like, get off of me, like, don't come in here just touch. I'm like, so she's like, oh, I'm sorry. So she leaves. And they had put a band around my belly like at some point earlier that said I wasn't having any contractions, and they took the band off, but this was like later. And so she comes back, and then she's like, somebody just came out and told me that you were like it hurt to the touch, so we're gonna move you into labor and delivery because we think you're going into labor, like the baby's coming. So I'm like, oh my god. So they moved me into labor and delivery. This the trauma of this. It was the most, and mind you, I wanted a home birth. And so, but just people who did not seem to care what I wanted, who would just touch my body and like not ask me if it was okay. But I got to the point where I'm coming in there and I'm like, oh my God, it feels like I have to poop. And I had been reading a pregnancy book. And so I knew, feeling like you have to poop, baby is coming. So she's like, just push. She's way over on the other side of the room. She's like, just push then. And she's sitting in a chair. I'm like, you're not even over here. Like you over there. So I pushed the baby out and then she's still over there. So I was like, is the baby's heart beating? So she comes, so then she gets up and she just like saunters over looking very apathetic. I wrote all of my story down and I call her cold midwife because she was so cold. And then she was like, no, I don't hear anything. Do you want to check? So she has another nurse check and they check and they're just placating me because it was just too early. But so now I'm crying. They're like, no, I'm crying profusely. I wrap the baby up in a blanket. I'm holding her. And she's like, you don't need to put her in a blanket, right? You don't tell me how to hold my baby and tell me that I don't need to. If I want to wrap her in a blanket, I will wrap her in a blanket. So like, I'm holding on to her. I'm ignoring this woman. And then my placenta refuses to come out. So I'm bleeding. My placenta's not coming out. She keeps like coming up and like she wanted to like come and check me or whatever. And I was like, no, I don't want you to do that. And she's like, I won't go all the way. So she puts her and then she goes all the way. And she does this like 2 or 3 times. So then she wants to check me again. And I said, you can't check me. And she was like, I won't go all the way. I said, you said that like 2 or 3 times already. And then you did it anyway. It's like, you can't touch me anymore. Like you can't. No, because I told you no, and you just making me uncomfortable. And so she was like, well, that's because, like, whatever. I don't care what your reason is. I told you not to. You did it anyway because you didn't care what I wanted. And now you can no longer touch me. So, like, it, but I'm like, just like I keep passing these like huge blood clots. She's like, you're losing a lot of blood. And it had been like an hour at first. And I was like, maybe my body just needs a little bit more time. Like, because they were like, we want you to get a DNC. I was like, I don't want a DNC. Mind you, I wanted to have a home birth. I didn't want to have extra interventions. And so now I've already been forced to have a hospital birth with people who have been careless with me the entire time that I've been here and who have been touching me when I didn't want to be touched, who have been negating things that I've been saying and trusting whatever they think over what I'm telling you with my body. Oh, your water didn't break. Like all of this the whole time. And now I'm telling you, I don't want the DNC. And so she's like, well, you're losing a lot of blood. Like, you could die. Like if you lose too much blood, you could die. And I was like, well, maybe it's my time. And she was like, it is not your time. That's probably the only caring thing that woman said to me the entire time I was there. But I was just kind of like, I had never had a need to have a DNR, but I had always kind of said, if something happened to me, if I didn't have any children in this world, let me go. Like, don't. So in my head, I was like, my baby just died. If it's my time, maybe it's my time too. And she was like, no, it is not. But I'm like, so they're trying to like convince me. They had been poking me when I didn't want to be poked this whole time. I had like a very uncomfortable IV in my arm that was becoming like inflamed and they wanted to replace it. And I'm like, no, you guys have been poking me and poking me. And like, I don't want a new IV. This one hurts. Like, and they're like, you really need to do this, whatever. she kept like, she was like, and so at one point, one of the nurses was like, well, we can give you something that will, try to induce the placenta to come. And so I was like, okay. So I took that. It didn't appear to be working. And it had been like some more time. And she's like, I really wish it would just come on its own. I'm like, me too, but it wouldn't, it just like wasn't coming. So then she was like, well, I can give you, because they wanted to do an IV in my hand. I didn't want to, because I'm like, it's going to hurt. I don't want an IV in my hand. And then she's like, I can give you something on your hand that will like make it so that you can't feel it or whatever. And then Cold Midwife was like, just give it to her. I said, no, like, you need to explain to me what this is. Because like I was just like, no. Because then she started to like walk away and go get it. And I said, no. You need to explain to me what this is, and I will tell you if you're going to give this to me, not Cold Midwife. And so she was like, explain. And so she's like, okay, so you do this or whatever. Like, do you want it? And I was like, and so then they're like, what do you want to do? And so I'm like, I could like feel, I was like, I want to talk to my mom. So my phone had been like charging. They go get my phone. I call my mom. She didn't answer at first. She called back. I'm like, Mom, why didn't you pick up the phone? She's like, I didn't hear, like, it wasn't anything. And I'm like, she's like, what's going on? I'm like, they want to give me a new IV. I don't want one. She's like, why can't they use the one in your other arm? She already knew that I had one because I've been talking to her about everything. And I'm like, they said it's occluded and my artery will burst if they try to use that when they want to give it to me in my hand. I'm scared because like it just hurt and I just didn't want to. I didn't want to be poked anymore. And I was like, have you ever had an IV in your hand? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, how did it feel? She did not describe it well. I didn't want it. I'm like, I don't want to do it. And so then I finally agreed to let the lady put the stuff on my mom because my mom is. I'm like, they want to have me a DNC. I don't want to do it. I'm like, they're telling me I'm losing too much blood. My mom's like, you got to put your big girl panties on. You got to do this. I'm like, I don't want to. But my mom kind of was like, you have to, like, you need to do this, like, do this. And so I was like, fine. So I let them put the stuff on my hand. And then at some point, and I tell my mom, I'm like, I need you to come here, please. And she was like, okay, I will get a plane ticket. I'm like, get a one-way ticket. Like, I need you to come. Like, at that point, I realized I can't, I just given birth by myself. Like, I need you to come. Like, you got to fly out here. She's like, okay, I'm going to buy a ticket right now. So she's doing that. At some point, the stuff that they had given me starts to work and it starts to give me like the worst contractions ever, but my placenta still won't come out. So the doctor shows up because it had been maybe 4 hours since I gave birth and my placenta still hadn't come out. He shows up. I'm like, and he's like, I wouldn't be here if you didn't need the surgery. Like you need to do this. And so I said, like, give me the consent paperwork for me to read. They're like, give you the paperwork for you to read. Yes. Like what? It was like they were so confused that I wanted to actually read the paperwork. I'm like, yes, give me the paperwork. And so I read it. I'm like, this says students. He's like, there won't be any students. And I was like, is there any potential that you might damage my uterus? And he's like, it's a possibility, but it's very unlikely. I've done this a lot. I said, somebody told me that she had scar tissue from a DNC and she had to get scar tissue removed later before her to be able to have kids. And he's like, I've never even heard of that. He said, whoever did that, like botched that. Like, I don't even know how that happened. He's like, but I have never had that happen. And I've been doing this, like, it's not going to happen. And so I was like, okay. So I signed it. And I'm like, just be careful. Like, just be careful with me. Because he's also a white man. And I just didn't really trust him like that. And so I'm like, just be careful. So they take me down. I'm like writhing in pain because of whatever this stuff is that they had given me to try to make it like come out. I'm talking to the anesthesiologist guy. And I was like, don't like shortchange me on the stuff. And he like didn't answer me. And I said, do you hear me? And he's like, yes, I heard you. Well, then respond to me. And he was like, it's not pain medicine. I was like, I don't think it's pain medicine. I don't want to wake up partway through this procedure because you didn't give me enough. Because I've had situations where I've had like getting my teeth and they didn't give me like enough of whatever and I could still feel what they're doing. And so I'm like, I just don't really trust the medical system to actually give me what I need to be okay in this moment. So I'm like, don't shortchange me. And he's like, I won't. So I'm like, okay. So then they do the procedure. I wake up. I wasn't in pain anymore. But it was just a terrible situation. This was November. So it's been a year, almost even an actual year. I have had a hard time, I'm not gonna lie, coping with this. I went on a grief retreat. I write letters to her, whenever I feel like there's something I want to say to her. But there's a lot of times where I just cry myself to sleep. I'm not gonna lie. Like I cry myself to sleep a lot. I have a playlist in her name. Sometimes I play my playlist, but there are times where I'm just sitting at dinner and I'm just crying, and somebody's looking at me, and I'm like, or I'm just on an airplane, I'm just thinking about her, and I'm just crying, and it's just rough.
Did
I
they do a memorial? Did y'all do anything for her? So once you got out of surgery, you came back to the room. Did they wrap her up for you properly? Because they should have cleaned her off and at least wrapped her up for you so you could actually hold her that way. Um, what did the
um
hospital do for you for her before you got discharged?
Yeah, so I was holding her at a point and I was like, I want to have her cremated. And they were like, we can set that up for you. You need to worry about that right now, but we can set that up. It won't cost you any money because apparently they have a cremation program. I don't know if they would have told me had I not told them I wanted her cremated, but they did while I was, in my procedure, wrap her up. They ended up sending somebody with a camera and they took photos. I've actually never looked at the photos. They're on like a SD card and my computer doesn't have like I can't put it in. So I would have to go buy something in order to be able to look at them. But I've taken photos of her with my phone. And somebody gave me some flowers. There was actually a woman, like at a point I was crying and I was like, I can't do this again. Like I'm not gonna do this again. And um one of the nurses like heard me saying this and she was like, and she asked one of the other nurses, did you tell her your story? And I looked at her and she's like, no, I didn't. And she's like, I think you should tell her. And so she tells me how she said the same thing happened to me. And I said, your water broke when you were 19 weeks. And she said, I was 17 weeks and my water broke. And she said, I didn't even get to look at my daughter. Her name was June. She said, I didn't even get to look at her. They wrapped her up in paper towels and carted her away. And I was like, paper towels? I was like, that is so evil. I literally screamed evil. I was like, evil. I was like they wrapped this woman's baby up in paper towels and she never even got to look at her. Um, and she said, yeah. And I was asking her, like, do you know why? Because they never gave me an explanation as to why this happened to me. They were like, they couldn't find any infection. They don't know why, this happened. I said, why do you know why? And she's like, no, they never. And she said she went on to have 4 children. She waited 2 years. She's like, I was just scared. She's like, I was just scared, but I waited 2 years. She's like, I have 4 kids. I said, did any of them come early? She's like, none of them ever came early. She's like, it won't happen again. If she had not told me that, I would have never tried again because I was like, I'm not doing this again. Like, this was terrible. This is like to now, like still the worst thing I have ever experienced in my life. And but she is the reason why I got flowers because she brings flowers to women there who go into labor early and lose their child. And she brought me flowers.
Thank God
Um,
for good nurses.
but I do have like my daughter cremated. She is in her nursery right now.
Oh,
Um, So there was that. I asked for a birth certificate. I was told that if you don't hit 20 weeks, you can't have a birth certificate, which really,
in the state that you're in. So it's very
yeah.
state dependent, yeah.
And so that really pissed me off because I was 19 weeks and 3 days. And so they gave me like a commemorative one and they, casted her hands and feet. And I have like a little
Oh,
baby box.
yeah.
Um,
I wonder if they did all that because of this nurse. Now that you say that, this nurse probably said, hey, y'all need to do something for people who lose babies because she went through it and she didn't get none of it.
I cannot believe they wrapped that woman's baby up in a. Every time I think about it, just
I'm
the
angered. I'm
disrespect,
angered at your story.
the
So,
disrespect.
because I think that, when we think about birthing in America in general, we know we already are at a disadvantage of being listened to, heard, and valued and respected. And just your story up to now shows that they did not value you or your life. They literally were doing all of the wrong things. And thank God that you had the voice and the conviction to say no. Because some people feel bombarded and bullied almost to let doctors continue to do wrong when you have body autonomy. You can tell them what to do with your body. You know your body best. And for them to continue to do this brings on another level of trauma on top of losing a baby. So
Yeah,
no, I get why you were like, I'm not doing this again because I don't want to have to deal with these crazy
I
people.
didn't want to do it again.
And
And
I
that
was
woman,
told, I'm trying to grieve, and then y'all are making me more traumatized.
It was a very traumatic birth experience, a very
Yeah.
traumatic birth experience. But there were maybe out of the maybe 11 people I interacted with, there were three of them who I would say didn't totally suck. Um, and most of them sucked. Most of them really sucked. They clearly did not care about me. It was terrible. But I have, yes, I have a baby box. I have photos. I have her ashes in a teddy bear urn. I had hope that was given to me by this other mother of loss. And so I really do appreciate her telling me that. And I had put my adoption contract on hold after the third failed adoption and just decided to try to have the baby. And it was on hold for 13 months. It actually my adoption contract is off hold as of maybe 10 days ago. In that time, I tried again, this time not with a donor, but with the person that I had started dating during my first pregnancy to get pregnant. And we did get pregnant, and I had a miscarriage. I found out when I was like 6 weeks and 5 days, or what should have been 6 weeks and 5 days, that I had a miscarriage. But I realized that it was a little bit, I think I can pinpoint when it happened, and I just was in denial. Um, I'd had some bleeding. After I found that I was pregnant, I went to the emergency room, and they told me that it was a UTI, and they treated me for a UTI. And what I now realize is, yes, there was a UTI, but two things were happening at once. I was miscarrying and I had a UTI. Because I was like, so I'm bleeding because of the UTI? And they're like, yeah, but it wasn't blood in my urine. It was like bleeding. But they had told me it was a UTI, so I believed that it was a UTI. And then when I went to my follow-up appointment, they told me to follow up with my regular doctor, like after I finished my course of antibiotics. And when I went, they did a pregnancy test and it was negative. And it was clear that the emergency room had led me astray. And they told me that there's like an emergency room only for pregnant women at their hospital, and like that's where I should ever go if I ever have a situation like that again. But they were like, did they test your HCG levels? And I was like, I don't know. And I went and back going looking at it later, and my HCG levels were 45. And she's like, if you had been at the one that's specifically for, pregnant women, they would have been able to tell you that you were miscarrying, because they should have caught that. She was like 45. And then the next time I came back, it was 0. So now I'm at 2 miscarriages, 3 failed adoptions. Um, my doctors are telling me not to connect the first and the second one. They're like, a second trimester loss is totally different than a first trimester. It was probably a chromosomal abnormality the second time. Um, I have in this time I have had I've had fertility testing because I was scared. And nothing is wrong. They're like, your follicle count is regular, your tubes are open. There's no structural issues with your, womb. I've had tests for autoimmune. There's nothing wrong. But it just feels like, I don't know. And it's almost like you would rather hear something was wrong because then it's something you could fix. But they're just like, things just happen and we don't know why. So that's where I'm at. And I'm hoping that these things are not signs that I'm not meant to be a mom, is what I'm hoping. Because it's been a lot of loss at this point.
Yes, it has. So let's talk about grieving, because like, how have you grieved all of this collectively? Like, it's been a lot of loss, almost like back to back to back to back. And obviously, you have family, friends, a partner to do this with. Well, like, how have you been handling? And I know you mentioned about crying yourself to sleep with this last loss. It's been a year since that, but you've had a loss since then. So
Yeah.
share with us, how have you grieved? What other things have you used to help you grieve? You mentioned a playlist, you mentioned going for
Yes.
walks, just crying it out. Like, how have you grieved, sis?
I definitely believe in crying it out. I don't believe in holding back tears. But yeah, the grief retreat that I went on was helpful. I went on that in March. Um, I was the only person there who was grieving. It was a grief retreat for melanated women, specifically. And so people were grieving different things. I was the only one who was grieving like a preterm labor. But it was still helpful just to take a few days. We connected in Puerto Rico and we just had conversation and like breath work and what else do we do? Like Reiki and like going to the beach and like writing stuff and releasing it, and it was a good experience. So that was probably the most tangible thing. I had a doula when I was pregnant, and she or they, I should say, I'm sorry. They like it was a my doula was also a massage therapist and like gave me a massage after the loss as well. It was like, I want to give you one more massage. And so I had that. And I'll say having a partner the second time, like because the first time he existed, but first of all, we were still very early in our relationship. We had literally been dating for not even 2 months the first time. And it wasn't his baby. And so I just felt like I felt like people cared about me, but I didn't feel like anybody cared about the baby. Like, I still feel that I am the only person who really is harmed by the loss of my baby. I will say my mom just sent a picture in our group chat, and my sister has a baby, almost 2 year old, and she got a ring with her living grandchild's name on one ring and her heavenly grandchild on the name on the other ring. So, and my mom has told me, she's like, I do care, but I just really, it just feels like, and so there was no father who was feeling what I felt. And the second time there was. I don't think he was hurt like I was, but he happened to call me when I was in the doctor and they had just told me and I was crying. He's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm at the doctor. He's like, what did they say? Like, why are you crying? And I'm like, they just told me that like I lost the baby. And he was actually on a work trip and he said, I want you to fly down here. Like, we need to be together. And so I ended up going home, packing a bag and going and just being with him and him just support. Like, I didn't have that the first time, and that felt good. And I was scared because I thought he would think something. He knew about birth losses, and I was like, he's gonna think something is wrong with me, and he's not gonna trust me to have his child. And I was like, do you want to try again? He's like, yeah. And so like even just being reassured, I just thought he would think something was wrong with me. And I remember when I was telling my best friend, um, he's like, guys don't think like that. And I was like, but that's where my head was. And like just reassuring me and even saying like, I will try again with you just made me feel better and just comforting me. And just, I don't know. I felt like I wasn't going through it alone the second time. Like I felt like I was going through the first time. So, but yes, I do have my playlist. I'm happy to share it with people, like the songs, maybe not the actual link to it because I have a photo of my daughter as the like picture of the playlist, but like just songs that make me fit. And sometimes I just play the playlist. Yeah, I've been told to go to therapy. I've been to therapy in the past for other things in life, and so I am a proponent of therapy in general. But I was just kind of like, I don't feel like anybody is going to make me feel better about the fact that I lost my daughter. And sometimes this is gonna sound maybe a little morbid, but I'm like, the pain helps me remember that she was there. Um, and so I'm kind of like, I don't know if I even want to get to a place where the pain is fully gone because I feel like it's all I have to remember her by. And I'm just like, I don't even know that I want, and maybe that's ridiculous because even that woman who told me about her loss, that had been 20 years prior. And she's like, I still think about her like every single week. She's
Yeah,
like,
I
I think
don't
about her all
think
the
the
time. She's like,
pain
it,
goes
it never goes
away.
away.
Yeah, I don't think the pain goes away. No different than that lady from 20 years. I think that how we deal with the pain may be different as time goes on. But the
Yeah.
pain is the pain. We still feel the pain very vividly, especially around the time of the annual anniversary it is when it comes up for me. But the holidays bring every year, the holidays are just hard for me. And
Yeah.
I'm honest with myself. I know that about myself. I got to do things throughout the holidays to bring me joy because otherwise I'm gonna be down in the dumps and it's gonna be take me a while to get out of it. But the pain
Yeah.
does not go away. We
I
know
will say, I
we know
forgot
the
to say your
baby's existed.
podcast.
You say
I
listening
forgot
to
to
my
say your
podcast has helped.
the woman who used to facilitate my prenatal support group that I would go to weekly when she sent me your podcast.
Oh, nice. Well, my
She was
podcast
like,
helps me too.
and even like learning that there was a bereaved Mother's Day. Because
Yeah,
when Mother's Day I learned that from your podcast.
yeah,
When Mother's Day happened, like my mom and my sister were like, "Happy Mother." Honestly, it did not make me. It made me hurt even more.
yeah.
I did not appreciate people bringing up, and I knew that my caring mother and my caring sister would acknowledge me on Mother's Day, and
Hmm.
it just made me hurt more. I did not tell them that, but they were like, they sent me gifts, and it didn't make me feel better.
Yeah.
But knowing that there was a bereaved Mother's Day, I was like, huh, maybe I
Maybe
don't
that's the day you
know,
should
maybe
celebrate
that's the
until you
day.
become a mother. But it was the opposite for me because I felt this. I felt the opposite. My family did not acknowledge me on Mother's Day, my first Mother's Day at all. And my first loss, I carried him full term. He was 39 weeks.
Yeah.
So I had a full baby. I was pregnant. Like we had a shower. We had all the things. And that first Mother's Day came back around. Ain't nobody said Happy Mother's Day to me. I said, I carried a baby for 10 months. He
Yeah.
may not be here, but I am a mother.
Yes.
Oh, I was so mad about that. But
Yeah.
no, bereaved Mother's Day is our day to celebrate and honor us as bereaved moms, because some people do still feel very iffy about Mother's Day, even if they have babies on the other side of it, right? After they've gone through loss, people still feel iffy about Mother's Day because they still remember the babies that they lost. So I love celebrating both and honoring both in this community. But I
Yeah.
love the thought of doing a grief retreat. I think having a grief retreat where you're able to tap into those spiritual tools that are necessary, that a lot is what you would learn in therapy anyways, right? Your therapist is going to teach you how to cope with all of this, right? But they're going to also tell you to go do other things to find other healing modalities that you can tap into that helps you. And I feel like you've done that. Therapy will just add to the work, add to the repertoire of things that you do. But also you could be a part of a group support group. We have one weekly on Thursdays. You can come join us.
Oh, maybe I need to be up in there.
We talk week to week on how we really feel and people really share. So I
Yeah.
love doing that type of work because I think that also heals me to really facilitate it, but also to hear how people can put feelings behind their pain. Because we all are grieving. It's just how we're grieving, how we're coping, how we are navigating through the world.
Yeah, hearing people's stories on your show is very different because it's just a little bit more of it's the same kind of grief.
Oh, for sure. Yes. They understand the pain.
Yes, the other grief retreat, and she talked about maybe doing one for women who've had experiences like mine, but like
Like maybe 20
it was
people.
only like four of us at
Oh,
that.
okay.
And people come out the woodwork and start telling you their stories of when they found out because I had already announced it. I had already not my second pregnancy.
Oh.
If people hear this, they'll be hearing many people will be hearing about that second pregnancy for the first time.
Oh,
But
okay, yeah, because
my
you hadn't
first
announced that
pregnancy,
one
yeah,
publicly.
everybody knew, and so people would reach out. How's everything? And I have to once you, as Britney Spears said in her book, once you told people that you're pregnant, you have to untell them. And
So how
so
did you do that? How was that process for you?
I literally have gotten off of social media and I have not been back. And because I started to put up a post and I was like, I can't do this. And I just deactivated my social media. So then it just became, I would tell people who were very close to me, or then when people brought it up, I would tell them, because I never announced it though. And I still haven't. I just retreated from the world and I just didn't announce it. But people who knew, I just told them. And then otherwise they would ask. And then people would come out of the woodwork and tell me their stories. Like I told somebody, she's like, how's it going? I'm like, actually, I went into labor prematurely. I wasn't far. And she's like, oh man, I had a miscarriage. And like, oh yeah, my sister had 4 miscarriages and 3 live births. Like people just come out of the and just tell you, but no, I retreated from the world. I didn't really announce it, to be honest.
I got you. But you definitely, because your coworkers, your boss, they all knew. So you had to go back to work and definitely share, like, hey, I'm not taking maternity leave. Did you take time off after this
Oh
loss?
my God, yes.
Okay.
I actually meant to say, so my employer, not my My because my job I teach and I have my like remote job. So in my remote job, they have a policy because I was like, I'm not going to work on Monday after this. Um, they have a policy that says if you get to 20 weeks, and they say if you have a stillbirth, you could take 4 weeks. So you get 8 weeks of parental leave if you carry the term. You get 4 weeks if you get to 20 weeks. And so I was at 19 weeks and 3 days. And so I literally sent the email and I was like, I know it says 20 weeks. But I was at 19 weeks and 3 days, and I just was in labor for really 2 days and had to have a very traumatic labor and delivery experience and then a DNC after. And I want my 4 weeks. And they were like, you got it. You got your 4 weeks. So they gave me the 4 weeks that you would get if you get to 20 weeks. And I appreciate it. I appreciate that we even have a policy that if you get to 20 weeks, you get half of your whatever, but also that they were willing to give me that leave anyway. And then in my teaching position, I had to reach out to HR and I was like, if you give birth, because I gave birth, I pushed my baby out. I was like, if you give birth and the baby like would, and they gave me the same leave that I would have otherwise gotten. They were like, oh, we need to look into this. Like, and nobody had ever asked before. And they were like, yes, we're going to give you your leave. And you can also take these 12 weeks of FMLA if you want to. So they gave me the full whatever. And my breasts were sore and hurting because I think my body wanted me to be breastfeeding, but there was no baby to breastfeed. I was bleeding for 2 weeks. I was in pain from the
You
surgery. So
were in full postpartum, which
I
people
was in
don't
full,
believe.
yes,
And I
I
think
had an
that
actual,
that's the naivete of the providers to not realize that when you lose a baby, your body's still going to go through postpartum. Your hormones are still going to go crazy. Your boobs are still going to leak milk, especially in the second trimester if you lose a baby, or third, right? Your body's still going to bleed because you pushed the baby out, even if you got a C-section. Like your body's going through a full postpartum without a baby.
yeah, it was terrible. But I'm glad I had that leave.
I'm so happy you had that leave too. That's the reason why I asked. I wanted to make sure I asked about that because I don't think people realized how hard it is to go back to work, especially if you have a loss and you don't have the ability to take leave, or there are nuances in the leave policy, as you mentioned, where, a letter to the HR, they'll still say no because it wasn't exactly at 20 weeks. So thank God that
I would have
you
quit.
knew how to work through the system, because not every system, the system's set up to fail us
Yeah,
every single time,
yeah.
no matter
I,
what. And lots of people don't recognize that your body still has to go through a recovery period, especially in a postpartum. Luckily for both of my pregnancies as well, I had a great employer who allowed me to take my entire maternity leave. So
as they should.
I took 12 weeks with my first son at 39 weeks, and with my daughter, I had her at 18 weeks, and they let me take 8 weeks.
Yeah,
So I got to recover physically, but I also got to recover mentally, because going back to work after you've been pregnant and people knew you was pregnant is the hardest thing you have to do. Luckily, now we have a little bit more remote work, and that's more common and normal, and you could probably make a transition easier back into work. Especially if you had to go back into the office. But I had to go back into the office back then. So that was hard to do. And people are coming up to you saying congratulations.
oh my
But
God.
then, you didn't have a baby. Your baby's not there. So yeah, I always ask that question, because I think that people don't recognize that life goes on. You still got to go back to work. You still have to produce, and you're grieving. You still have
Yeah,
to, focus on work, in your case, teach and do other things, but you're still grieving. You're still trying to move on with your life. So
yeah.
my
And
last
in your
question.
case, being 39 weeks, even people who you didn't tell
Hmm.
knew because they were looking at you.
Yep. You can see
There
me.
were
I was
many people who
waddling.
I didn't tell. I only told 2 people at the university, 3 people at the university, and people didn't know because
They didn't know.
I'm thick and I was almost 20 weeks. And so if they didn't know that I was pregnant, they didn't know to be looking
They
for
couldn't
that.
know. Yeah. No, they knew I was pregnant because I was
Oh
big
my
pregnant.
God. Oh my
Yeah. So
God.
it's hard. So it's hard either
I
way,
just virtual hug.
right? Virtual.
That's
It's hard either way. How we navigate this is hard either way. So I would love for you to talk about like next steps on your journey. Are we continuing the adoption journey? Continuing the pregnancy journey? How are you going to continue to navigate motherhood going forward?
Yeah, so I'm trying to do the adoption now. I've told them that I will now not take any matches who are less than in their third trimester, because just having the longer period and then them to potentially back out at the end of it is more birth mom support that you're having paid for. And I actually only have 11 months left on my contract because I paused it at 13. Yeah, 13. So I only have 11 months left on my contract. And so I'm trying to protect myself and only taking, later matches so that I don't end up supporting somebody for 6 months and then they decide to change their mind. So, and I still do. The problem is, if I had never been pregnant, I don't think I would know the difference between the feeling of holding that adoptive baby and the feeling of holding my baby, who I gave birth to. And I feel like I can't, even though I was always scared of being pregnant and giving birth, and even though my fears were realized, I can't forget touching her through my stomach and how it felt. And I can't forget the I don't think I can, if I have the ability to carry a baby to term, I can't forget how it feels. And now I want that feeling again. And I wish, I feel like I still will give, hopefully, birth one day to a living child. Because now I can't unfeel that feeling.
Get it. So you want both. You want motherhood, however God intends to give it to you.
Yes.
I love that for you.
Yeah.
I love it, love it, love it. So I would love for you to just leave our listeners with encouraging words, especially those who are navigating a journey of motherhood anyway, like because it is tough no matter how you do it. What encouraging words can you leave with our listeners?
I think trust yourself. However you feel like you want to get there, whether it's IUI or IVF or adoption, whether it's a sperm donor or someone that you love romantically, I think trust yourself, because you know, and continue to trust yourself, because there might be days, like there's days where it's like, am I really supposed to be doing this? Just trust yourself. Just trust yourself and continue to. And I'm the kind of person, I have a really hard time giving up on stuff. Like, even when I feel like this is so hard and I want to give up, I have a really hard time actually giving up. I think it's a blessing and a curse. But maybe like I can send that juju to other people who like want to give up, and send you my like relentless hope to you. And then hopefully maybe you won't give up, because even if listening to some of the stories on your podcast is any indication, there are so many women, I'm not there yet, but there are so many women who make it to then, even you, like making it to the other side and do have that baby. And so like, there's one woman whose story is like in the top of my head, and I'm not going to reiterate her story from your show, but like making it to the other side. There's the other side. And keep listening to the episodes. And some of them are like scary too, but some of them it's like, but now I know something that I didn't know. And I know a tool that somebody else now uses, and now I know that I have access to that option. Or like I know about something that could potentially happen. And so now I have even more tools to advocate for myself, because I know what could be happening when like something is awry. So advocate for yourself, trust yourself, and don't give up.
I love it. I love it. Well, you're not on the socials unless you want to drop where people can stay in contact with you.
I am really not. I'm on technically Snapchat with my notifications turned off. I eased my way back in by reactivating my Snapchat. I think it's peace at peace, like PACE _ treat TREAT. So I'm on there, but like I said, my notifications I turned off, so I just check it when I check it, because I don't want to be notified. Right? I'm just not there yet. And I was very active on social media before. I was a very social media, but I'm just like I'm not back yet there. But you can find me there.
Ain't nothing wrong with it. Take your time, sis. Take your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing on the podcast. This has been amazing. Thank you for taking us on this journey because I know someone's going to be blessed from it for sure. I know I was.
Thanks for listening.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com to stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter. Please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.